Good evening, everyone. It's author R. Weir coming to you from Colorado for my latest episode of Bringing Life to Characters. We've got another great guest tonight, another local Colorado author, which I always enjoy talking to a lot of Colorado authors. I was going to throw up a couple of pictures from Molly McGee's event I did this weekend, which was really good on Saturday. It wasn't quite as good on Sunday, but here's some of the people I always take, if I remember, I don't always remember, taking pictures of people who are buying some of my books. Here are some of the folks, and I share them always in my newsletter, but I told them, they could be famous for 5 seconds and be on the internet. But had a lot of great shoppers out there buying Christmas gifts. And I've got another event this weekend that I'll be going to, which I'll talk about afterwards and such. And then just a quick reminder, pick up my latest book, Murder by 100 Cuts. My Jarvis Man, my private eye, dealing with the trial of the serial killer who was from the previous book, The Front Range Butcher, which has been getting some really good reviews. So I hope everyone will go out there and buy all my books, and hopefully buy all the books from my guest tonight, not my newest guest, but my guest tonight. And I'll put her up here. It's Helen Starbuck. Hi, Helen. How are you doing?
I'm good, thanks. How are you?
Good. I see a wall of books back behind you. So are they all your books, or are they somebody else's books?
They're not books, not all books that I've written. They're just, I'm a longtime reader, and I tend to hang on to books. I know some people read them and pass them on or donate them, and I tend to hoard my books. So they're books I've read that I've really enjoyed.
Yeah, big people have seen. I've got lots of books back here too, including some of my books I have as well. But no, and we got rid of a few. We put some in little free libraries and stuff sometimes, especially when I moved 5 years ago, it was like, when you're moving, it's like, do we want to take all these books? And sometimes you're like, my wife always tells me, she goes, you're going to regret later that you got rid of all that stuff. Of course, she was right. I have to say, yeah, she was correct.
I've often said that, you don't miss anything until you give it away. And then the next time you turn around, it's like, wow, I really wish I hadn't given that away. So.
Well, and I don't always remember. It's like, did I give that away or do I not? And I'm looking all over the house for it. And my wife says, I bet you got rid of it before we moved. I told you not to do that. But. Well, Helen, thanks for being on tonight. Tell us a little bit about yourself. You're from Colorado, live in Colorado. I don't know if you're from Colorado, but give us a little bit.
I am from Colorado. I'm a third-generation native. My great-grandparents came from the New England area, but grandparents, parents, and my generation were all born and raised here. I still live in Colorado. My previous professional life was as an operating room nurse, and then I transitioned. I was offered a job at the Association of Operating Room Nurses Journal, which is a specialty nursing journal. And I worked as a clinical editor. What that meant was I was the only nurse on the journal staff. The rest were journalists or English majors. And so my job, in addition to editing articles and doing developmental editing with people that wanted to submit an article for the journal, my job was to explain the bizarre aspects of operating room nursing that they had questions about. And often it was something like, have I got this x-ray the right way up, And so that was a lot of fun. I learned a lot. And I learned a lot and really enjoyed working in the OR. I worked in main ORs out in the suburbs, and then I worked for the majority of my career at Children's Hospital, and that was fascinating. So that's kind of me.
Nice. So are there any wild stories you could tell us about working in the OR for a nurse that doesn't violate HIPAA rules?
Well, yeah, there are probably a lot of them, but I probably shouldn't tell them. And the only thing that translated into my books was that the idea for my first book in the series, The Mad Hatter's Son, was triggered by helping to take care of a young woman that we saw in the OR repeatedly for maintenance things like inserting a gastrostomy tube so she could be fed and other things like that. And I remember thinking at the time, this would make a really good story. And so the story is not about her, and there are no details about her, but it's based on what happened and the outcome. So it's the clinical diagnosis and weirdness that was associated with it. So that's a story you could read about.
Yeah. So did I read on your website you have some pets of some kind?
I have, at the moment, I have one cat. My other cat passed away 2 years ago, but my remaining cat, Bean, and he may decide to intrude and photobomb things. He sometimes does, and then other times I never see him.
Yeah.
I have a horse who's is kind of a pasture pet, although my trainer uses him for lessons to keep him in shape.
Yeah.
And I have 2 grand dogs and a grand lizard. So.
Well, my daughter has a lizard also. She has a gecko and she has a tarantula as well. So, and she lives with us these days in the lower reaches of our house. But
yeah,
we can't kill spiders anymore in the house. She's a big no, you can't kill the spiders.
well,
they're good.
It's funny because I never have. I always get a glass and put it over them and slide something, and then I take them outside and I let them go.
Well, that's good. You know, that's a point in your favor, right? When you go meet the man, when it's all said and done, right? See, I saved the spiders. Oh, I'm a good person.
Yeah.
So, do you have any hobbies other than writing? I don't know if writing is considered a hobby, but sometimes it is if you're still working as well. It doesn't always pay the bills to be an author.
I ballroom dance. That's a hobby, and I really enjoy it. And I haven't done much lately, but I have done pastel portraits. I like to do portraits, and like I said, I haven't done any recently. Things have been kind of crazy, but that's another hobby. Let's try to think if there was anything else. I guess I'm kind of a boring person. I read, obviously.
Got lots of books, yes.
Yeah.
And I saw you said you had read Margaret's book recently.
That's so good.
I always butcher Margaret's name. I have it phonetically written here so I don't mess it up.
And these books up here are all her books.
Yes. Yeah. Well, she said Mishushima.
Yes.
There we go. I always get her name right. But she's a really, really, really nice lady, and met her several years ago at the library over in Westminster, and then ran into her at BoucherCon this year. And I said, would you want to be on my podcast? She says, sure.
Yeah. No, she's great. She do you come to the Sisters in Crime book club?
I was in the club for a year, and it was during COVID, and of course it was all, and it always seemed to be on a weekend. I was already doing something. So,
well, they have a book club. We're going to talk about her new book tomorrow.
Yeah.
And you don't have to be a member to listen. It's a Zoom meeting, but so I'm looking forward to it. Yeah, she's really nice, and I love her books. I've enjoyed all of them. This one's very good, I think.
Yeah, she used to live in Colorado. She's moved to Washington to be closer to her grandbaby, so which is understandable.
Yep.
So, all right. So, how long have you been writing? Obviously, you did it for work a little bit. You did editing and things like that for work.
Yeah. Well, I've been writing for myself since about late middle school, and that through middle school and high school, and even some in college, it was mostly dissatisfaction with real life. So I would write something that was the way I thought things should have turned out. And I joke that early on, I wrote about the Beatles and meeting them. And my best friend, she was madly in love with Ringo, and I was totally infatuated with Paul. And so we wrote these goofy little stories and would pass them back and forth in French lab, which is probably why it took me until college to actually learn how to speak French. But my writing taste has changed, thankfully. And I don't write Beatles stories anymore.
And what motivated you to be an author? What was it that, what was it? Was that moment in time where it just kind of goes, I want to be an author. I'm crazy enough. I want to be an author, right?
Well, as I said, I love to read, and I was always impressed with people who write and tell stories. And I felt like I had stories to tell, and just decided, what triggered it, the books I've published so far. I moved in 2015, and I was going through stuff as you do when you move, and trying to weed out stuff so that you didn't have to pay an exorbitant amount to the movers. And I found the first 4 chapters in my first book and read them and thought, I still like this. So I sat down and I thought, well, I'll see where this goes. And I found an editor who specialized in mysteries and was very good. And between her and I, we got things shaped up and in good shape. And then she said to me, well, how do you plan to publish? And I said, well, I hadn't thought that far. But she explained the process of traditional publishing, about how you have to get an agent, and then the agent has to find a publisher. And she said, that can sometimes take 3 to 5 years, depending on, how hard it is to find each of these. And she said, new authors are up against more difficulties because you're not tried and true, and they don't know you. And so anyway, and she said, or you can self-publish. And she sent me a 4 or 5 page email about all the things you do if you wanted to self-publish. And about the only thing I understood was you need a website and you need headshots. And I thought, well, I can get headshots, And the photographer who did it said, oh, when's your book coming out? And I said, well, probably never, because, I don't know what to do about it. And so fortunately, she put me in touch with a person who helped with all that. So that's why I always tell people to get out into author organizations and meet people, because I have found over time that those connections have been so helpful. So that's kind of the journey that got me to this spot. And I just kept going after that first book, and here I am.
Yeah, it's a big learning curve process in the beginning. Yeah, you kind of go into it and you go, well, it must not be too hard. Everybody, well, especially now, everybody seems to be publishing a self-published book or even a traditionally published book, one way or another. But yeah, it is a lot to learn, the formatting and book covers and all that.
Well, and that's why I ended up connecting with a cover artist, and she also formats ebooks and paperbacks as well. So it's kind of a one-stop shop with her, and it's not something I have to figure out. And I have skills with computers, but they only go so far. And my frustration level continues to rise. And I get to a point where it's just like, not doing this. And so it's nice to have those people around that can help you with that. And they know how to do it so much better than I would. So
Yeah, that's what Reed Farrell Coleman, when I interviewed him a couple of weeks ago, he was sitting there, and he's traditionally published. So, but he says, marketing and stuff, says, I pay people to do all that stuff. My job's to write the book. So I let other people handle all those things. And I go, well, if you make enough money like you do, Reed, you could afford to do all that. But a lot of us don't
Yeah.
necessarily can afford it because it's not cheap.
No,
Yeah.
and I think most of us end up doing it ourselves because, like you, I can't afford to pay somebody the amount of money most of the good ones want, and so I just do the best I can and hope for the best.
Yeah, that's that. So do you remember the first thing you wrote? Then you were talking about the Beatles. Was that really your first thing you used to write back when you were trading back and forth?
Yeah, that's the very first thing, and then gosh, when was it? I was in my early 20s, I guess, and I wrote what I thought was a romance set in Florence and Italy. And when I got it all done, sent it into Harlequin Romance, which, of course, back then you didn't need an agent. You could just
Right.
send stuff. And they were very nice. They said, we really enjoyed your story, but it's more of a mystery than a romance. So it really doesn't fit. And I thought, okay. And that was kind of when the light went on. And I thought, well, I guess mysteries and suspense are my forte. And not, my books all have romance in them, but they're not romance, pure romance. So that was the next thing after the Beatles.
Yeah, because there's so much, everything kind of crosses over into everything. Those days, maybe it was more, it was a romance, it was a mystery, it was a thriller,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
now everything kind of blends. It's like music too, everything blends together these days.
Yep. That's true. It's very fluid these days.
So who are some authors that you enjoyed reading that inspired you, maybe as a romance, but maybe it was really mystery, right?
Well, early on, in high school and stuff, I really enjoyed Daphne du Maurier, of course, her famous Rebecca. And she has other books that I don't know if they're as well known. There's Don't Look Now and My Cousin Rachel. Those were good books. And her books always have this thread of mystery that runs through them. I mean, they're not murder mysteries per se, but there's this tension and these questions and the uncertainty of how things are going to turn out. And I really enjoyed those. That was early on. There was an English author. I think it's, oh man. Oh, Mary Stewart. I enjoyed her Arthurian based books. And that was when I was much younger. These days, I've kind of, when I was thinking about the books I like, I realized that I mostly read women authors. I like Craig Johnson and his Longmire series, and I like Ian Rankin and his Rebus stories. But mostly I've got women authors. I love Margaret's books, her canine series. Sue Grafton was a favorite. Love Tana French. She's an Irish author. Writes beautifully. And Tammy Hogue, she writes some really intricate, great mysteries / thriller / suspense. I love her characters. And I think for me, that's the huge thing. I have to have characters that I feel strongly about one way or the other, either good or bad.
Well, that's important in books, character driven stories. I mean, that's That's what grabs you as a reader, I think. I mean, the action's important too, but if the character's kind of blah, who cares, right?
Well, right. If it can be a great plot, but if I don't care about the characters, it's kind of like, I don't know why I'm reading this. Um, so, authors that can do that. Tammy Hogue writes a police procedural series that has two detectives, a woman, Nikki Liska, and her partner, Sam Kovac. And they're both great characters, but Sam, I just love that character. In fact, I reviewed one of her books and I just said, "And Sam Kovac, you break my heart." And she liked it. It's like, oh my God, this is a famous author and she liked my review. I still get tickled about things like that.
Yeah. So then it sounds like you're independent, self-published,
Yeah.
not traditionally published. Like me, I didn't have the patience to go through all that stuff. So I tried to do it back in the 80s when I had written some stuff, like I said, way before, there was any choice
Yeah.
and stuff. So have you ever tried to be ever submit anything, or do you think it's just like, I'm self-published, I don't want to even try?
I I like to control things too much.
Yeah.
So, I want to have control over my covers. I want to own my copyright to my books. And I know that there are a lot of advantages to being traditionally published. And I mean, if you can get a contract, that's wonderful. I don't know, I don't want to keep a story in this hovering pattern of a couple years while you try to find people that want to work hard enough to get it published. And so I probably, my last effort was to send that story to Harlequin, and that kind of ended my attempt at getting traditionally published.
Well, and I've had plenty of interviews I've done with some authors who are traditionally published, and Bruce Robert Coffin was one, and I was talking about, well, you're traditionally published, so they'll handle all the marketing and things like that. And he goes, that ain't necessarily true.
No.
A lot of them don't anymore. They expect you to do that. Yeah, they'll edit the book and they'll maybe do a little bit of press type stuff, but and they'll help get the cover design, but the marketing side is still something you got to do. And I'm like, well, then it's probably not worth the effort. Then for me, I'm already doing it anyway. I might as well take those other steps.
Right. And I've heard that too. And I've heard a couple folks that got traditionally published and then not with a smaller press, and then it went out of business, and they had to try and buy back their copyright because they weren't able to continue to publish the book because they didn't own the copyright. And so that was another thing that I was like, I don't know if I want to give that away. So
yeah, and you don't get the covers back either. So even if you want to put it back out, you're going to have a cover made again. And
right.
Yeah, like you, I didn't have the patience, and I'm a bit of a control freak too. So
yeah, I've been told that for more than one person.
All right, so tell us about your books. I know you have a series, and it's Annie Collins. Is that right?
Yes, it's the Annie Collins mystery series.
And is that the one you said you had written 4 chapters for, and then went back later?
The first book in the series, The Mad Hatter's Son. Yep.
Yep, that one right there, right? Yep.
It's Annie Collins is an operating room nurse, and she is cajoled into helping a friend that she was very close to, and they became estranged, to try and find out what's going on with her. She has a lot of vague physical complaints, and her doctors and her husband feel like it's related to a recent miscarriage, but Annie's friend feels like it's something more serious. And so it's this sort of cascade of events that get Annie into a fair bit of trouble. And so that was the first book. And I honestly thought, it'd be a one-time story. And then I finished it, and I liked the characters so much that I didn't want to stop writing about them. So it's now, I just got book 5 in the series back from my proofreader. So I'm hoping that will be out in the new year, maybe January, February. I'm not quite sure at this point. So it's, there's actually 2 main characters and then a really important secondary character. There's Annie and her next door neighbor, Angel Cisneros. He's an assistant DA. And then there's the police detective that they get involved in about midway through. And I always laugh because I thought Frost, the detective, would be a one-time character, but he pretty quickly decided that, no, he's sticking around for all of them. And he turned into one of the characters that I hear the most about. People just love him. And I've had so many people ask me to write a book about him, so they could learn more about him and where he originated and, his journey from patrol officer to homicide detective. So I'm working on that. He's not being very cooperative. So,
Well, sometimes you worry about taking one of those side characters and putting him in his own in light, and sometimes it doesn't work. They're better as a side character, and the little thing you bring up little things about him as it goes on.
Yeah.
I have a lawyer in my Jarvis Mann series that I've had people say, "Oh, you should do a book and use him." Well, I don't know enough about law to do a full lawyer book anyway and stuff, but I kind of like him as being a side character that pops in and out occasionally and causes havoc, being a lawyer and, all that stuff. And sometimes it isn't necessarily the best thing to put them in there in their own story, and doesn't work as well, at least for me. So,
well, and part of the story is going really well. And it's one of those situations where I have the beginning and I kind of know what the end is going to be. And I just can't get them connected yet,
Sure. So you had the first book was The Mad Hatter's Son, and then book 2 is No Pity in Death, right?
Yes. And in that book, Annie is sort of peripherally involved. There have been a lot of deaths in the ICU step-down unit. So most hospitals have an ICU, and then the patients are, when they're well, are sent to sort of a step down in the intensity of the care. And so the problem is not that the deaths are necessarily unexpected, because these folks are quite ill. And it's that the number has increased enough that it's caused concern with the hospital. And their internal investigation hasn't really turned up anything, but they're still concerned about it. So Frost gets drug in to, see if he can find anything that would make them believe that this was someone intentionally helping people cross over. And the fascinating thing about writing the book was researching Angels of Death. I wondered what would push nurses or other healthcare people like docs or whatever to do something like that. And the cases that are well known, it's interesting that a lot of them, several of them have very high numbers of patients they've offed before they were discovered. So I'm getting off topic, but I'm always amazed when you start researching this stuff, what you find out.
Well, the internet is, I did a serial killer book, and you put in serial killer, and oh my gosh,
Yeah,
billions of search things come up,
yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I'm sure Angel of Death probably was the same way.
Yeah, yeah. It's an interesting bunch of information. And then the third book is The Burden of Hate. And in that book, a convicted felon that Annie and Angel helped put away manages to escape. And so he's got a vendetta, and he's coming for both of them. And this is the book that there was a long slow period between book 3 and book 4, and I jokingly say that I put my characters through so much hell in book 3 that they didn't want anything to do with me. It was like, girl, we're done. We're going on vacation, and we may or may not be back.
You needed a break, yes.
Yeah. But they came back eventually, and then A Cold Case of Conscience is book 4. And there are several cases that are involved in this that Annie again helps Frost look into. So
there's a child there in the background. Is that
yeah, there's a case
telling thing there?
She gets intrigued and sort of badgers Frost into keeping her in the loop. A young woman, a 20-something, is found dead. And in the course of trying to investigate that, it turns out that she, as a child, was a victim of sexual assault. And so then the question is there any connection between those two cases? Is what happened then related at all to her death, her present day death? So yeah, there is a child involved. I will say this: there's nothing graphic. That I'm kind of one of these people when I'm reading a book or watching something on TV. If a child gets hurt and it's too graphic, or an animal gets hurt and it looks like it's going to be too graphic, then I'm out of there. I can watch other people in TVs and books and stuff go through all kinds of horrendous things, but those two categories are sensitive for me. Let's put it that way. So there's no real graphic stuff about the child abuse, but it is there. So
is Annie kind of an amateur sleuth then?
She is, and not necessarily intentionally, like in the first book. She is convinced that something criminal has happened to her friend, and she has to give a statement to Detective Frost when her friend commits suicide. And so that's how she gets initially connected with him. And she keeps coming back to him with, have you thought about this? I found this out, and this backs up my thought that, and he's like, oh, gosh, how am I going to get rid of this woman? There's one point where she walks out of the elevator because she's come to tell him something else, and he's standing there with his arms crossed, and he looks at her and goes, "We meet again, Miss Collins. To what do I owe the pleasure this time?" You know, and so they kind of form this bond, and he likes to run things by her. He likes her in particular, and even though she annoys the heck out of him at times, so she's kind of a reluctant young Miss Marple, I guess.
Yeah, she doesn't ever just come by to say, "Hi, how you doing? How's the wife and kids?" Whatever, a little small talk. And when she shows up, he knows, oh, trouble is brewing, right?
Yeah, it's like, oh gosh, I know you're going to get involved in this, aren't you? How can I talk you out of this? At one point in one of the books, he says, "What do I have to do? Do I have to lock you up in jail to keep you from interfering?" She goes, I don't think you can do that. And he said, "Well, you'd be surprised what I can do." So, there's humor that runs through the books, and of course, romance eventually.
So was the romance between those two?
No, that's between her and her next door neighbor, the assistant DA.
Gotcha.
They've been good friends for quite a while. He's always wanted more, and she's kind of kept him at arm's length because he is quite the ladies' man. And so she's kind of like, I love you, let's be friends, but nothing more. And eventually that resolve kind of wears down and they end up together. So
he grows up and
yeah
figures out, well, maybe one woman's enough, right?
Yeah, exactly. So
typical man.
Yeah, well, you got to sow your wild oats, and hopefully you've sown them all before you decide to settle down and you're happy with who you settle down with.
So can you tell us about book 5? We have a title for it, and give us a little snippet of what it's going to be about.
The title of it is The Weight of Guilt. And Angel is asked, well, in the previous book, he is frustrated with the situation at the DA's office, and criminal defense attorney that he knows makes him kind of one of those Godfather offers you can't refuse. So he's been working in this criminal defense practice for 2 years or so, and his senior partner asks him to take over the defense of the partner's niece, who's been accused of stabbing a surgeon to death. And so the book is about him trying to represent this and figure out a defense for this person who's not all that cooperative. She's from a wealthy family. She's very entitled, and she has a hard time telling the whole truth. And by this time, 2 years, Annie and Frost is retired, and Annie and he are doing PI stuff. And when the PI business gets slow, she goes and works in the OR, as a temp. And so he asked them to help him try and find evidence that she's innocent. And most of what they're finding is that it's entirely possible she may have done it. At least everybody around her thinks she has, and they can't find anything to prove otherwise. So it's kind of this struggle. I'm not a lawyer, so I tread lightly because I don't want to get off in the weeds on stuff that isn't accurate. So it's mostly focused on Annie and Frost's investigation and interviews with people in the OR and that kind of stuff. I did have a defense attorney look at the closing argument that I have him give, and that was very helpful. She said, well, first of all, you want to refer to your client by name. You don't want to call them my client. You don't want to call them the defendant. You want to repeat their names so that the jury relates to them as a person. And she made several comments, and it was very helpful. And so, I was like, okay, well, thank you. Because, I, as a nurse, have a hard time reading books or watching shows on TV where the medical aspect of it is just off the wall. So I don't want to offend any lawyers. So, like I said, it mostly focuses on Annie and Frost and Angel's just frustration with having to deal with his partner who's trying to micromanage everything, and having to deal with this client who sort of cooperates, but not entirely. So that's book 5.
So I have to ask you a question. I get asked this all the time about Jarvis Mann, my private eye. Since you were an OR nurse, is Annie you?
I have more friends who have known me forever, and a number that we worked together in the OR have all said, yeah, she's you. Totally you. So yeah, I guess, she kind of has my sense of humor, and I will say this, she's braver than I am, and she's more persistent. There are points in the book where I would have just said, okay, I'm done. Let's see how this goes, but I'm not going to mess with this anymore. Yeah. And but she's more persistent and braver than I would be. So, but yeah, she's kind of me.
Yeah. Is it written in third person or is it first person?
The Annie Collins series is first person, so it's Annie
first person for her eyes. So
yeah,
that's why people think the Jarvis Mann Private Eye series is through first person. People go, "Is Jarvis you?" And I'm like you. Yeah, there's some aspects like I am like him.
Yeah,
sense of humor is me. But as I tell people, I'm not as tough as he was. And I wasn't the ladies' man he was, which I always mention my wife would attest to. So
yeah.
So yeah, there are aspects you bring to it, but definitely it's not 100% you. But
no, and generally my characters aren't based on anyone. Frost and the father in one of my standalone books, Legacy of Secrets, have characteristics of my dad. But other than that, the characters are pretty much made out of whole cloth, in my head.
Yeah, well, that's good. You don't want to be sued, so.
No.
If someone goes, hey, wait a minute, you wrote about me there, I think.
Well, and I always, at the launch parties, I always tell people, I have a little name a character after you contest. And whoever wins it, I always say, okay, do you want to be a good guy or a bad guy?
Yeah.
And so I use their name, but I don't base the character on them. So they always get a big kick out of that.
I do that too. I get people when I sign books for people and they want their first name, they'll have a name. It's like, wow, that's a unique name. Yeah. I'm going to write that down, and I have a list of names. So if you're always looking for good names, you want to try to be different and stuff. But I do ask them the same question. Do you want to be good or bad? And it's always interesting hearing their,
I'm always surprised that the majority of them want to be bad guys.
Some people do.
It's like, oh, I want to be a bad guy. I have had one person say, I want to be a good guy. And it's like, okay, so that's always fun.
I did get one comment tonight. Yay. Krista's actually one of my beta readers, but she's an author too. So, but
nice. Well, it's good to meet you, Krista.
Yes, and Krista was at BoucherCon as well this year, and that's the first time she and I have met in person. So, not a beta reader, but she's read she's an ARC reader. She reads my books and does reviews on them beforehand and stuff. So
I have a group of 4 people who I rely on when the story's basically finished. I send it to them, and they have been wonderful. I on book 3, which was a finalist in the National Indie Excellence Award and got a starred review from Kirkus, which blew me away. My friend who reads mysteries and suspense voraciously called me up one night and said, "How much does our friendship depend on what I tell you?" And I said, doesn't. That's why I send these. She goes, "I hate the ending. I hate it so much that if I weren't your friend, I probably wouldn't read any more of your stuff." And I was like, "Oh my God, what have I done?" And so we were on the phone for a couple hours, and she gave me all the reasons she didn't like it. And we talked about, well, tell me where you would like to see this go.
Mhm.
And then I talked to my editor, and she said, keep her around, because I didn't really like the ending either. And I was kind of like, well, why didn't you say something?
Right.
So
That's what your editor's for, right? She's supposed
I
to.
know, and she was always so good, and that was kind of a shock for me. And so I completely redid the ending, and like I said, it went on to get a Kirkus starred review, and the ending was so much better. So I love those 4 people because they keep me honest, and they're not afraid to be real. That's not all, oh, I love your books.
Right.
So
Yeah, you got to get that constructive criticism, and obviously, if you rely on, if she's the only one that said they hated it, I mean, if there's another person that agrees with you, then yeah, because
yeah,
you're so close to it. Sometimes you can't always see
you can't.
it. So, and are you a pantster, or are you a plotter, or do you sit somewhere in between?
Well, I'm a pantser. The story comes and I just write it. Now I will say I often have to go back and do a timeline and plot things out to make sure that the time frame hasn't got completely screwed up, or a various number of things. But when I was working as a clinical editor, I could outline articles, professional articles, with no problem, because of course they started at A and they ended at Z. With fiction, I can't do that. I've tried to outline a story, and it doesn't work for me. So I always admire people who can, because I sometimes think you could write faster if you do, but I can't do it. So it just is what it is.
There's another big.
Oh, there's Alan. Hi, Alan.
Yep.
I know her from the Bighorn Book Nook.
Yeah, I don't think all of that was on. She has a pretty long arms assignment, but she was saying, yeah, she said, watch her processes. I guess it all did fit on there. Okay. I was going to say, I didn't think it all fit on there, but yes. So, but I thought it was interesting when you were talking about the character was talking and wanted a bigger part. And I tell people that I'm a pantser too.
Yeah.
That the characters kind of sit there and go, it's almost like in a movie, the actor's like, I need more lines. I need more lines. I need a bigger part in the story. And I sometimes have those characters that you think are going to be small characters
And
that turn into larger characters, and they're sitting there on your shoulder going, no.
You're going in the wrong direction. Well, I philosophically, I kind of think that our characters and our stories live in a parallel universe, and they choose us to tell their stories. And I think that's why they become so insistent at times when we're getting their stories wrong,
Yes.
So I'm always surprised when that happens. And I have to say, they're usually right,
Well, when you were talking about plotting, a plotter maybe would go faster. I was on a panel at Killer Nashville one year with James, who I'm blanking on his last name, but he does street like crime books and stuff. And he was a plotter and I was a pantster. And I was saying, well, it probably is easier for you because you're a plotter. He goes, Not necessarily. Sometimes, yeah, I have this strict plot, but
Yeah.
when I start to write it, it doesn't
It's-
always conform to that. So I
exactly.
sometimes have to do. So yeah, he's like, no, not necessarily. So
I
and the
suppose.
fun thing about being a pantser is you can write yourself into a corner too. That's always the fun part. Write yourself
Oh
into
yeah.
that you got
Oh
to
yeah.
write yourself back out of, or you got to have to go back and rewrite to
Yeah.
fix
Well, being a pantser does require a lot of revising. At least I find that to be the case. And stuff that I take out, I never throw away. I always paste it into a new document and put it in my little bits and pieces file,
it.
because it's interesting to me how many times in a different story, something I've taken out of one story, all of a sudden it's like, well, that really works really well here. So, I've advised people that are, asking questions, don't throw anything away, because you never know when it'll come in handy or when it might trigger something else. And so that's what I do.
So you talked about the detective story that you're kind of working on. You said you know how it's going to start, you think you know how it's going to end.
Yeah.
Have you already written the ending, or is it just in your mind?
No, I've written probably a chapter of the ending, and I just have to figure out how to get there.
But so do you sometimes in your stories jump ahead and write later chapters before you've written, or are you pretty much chapter 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and you just kind of just go right in order?
It depends. There have been some stories that I've had the first part and I know where it's going to go. I don't necessarily write it. And then, like this one, I'm about a third of the way through, and then I have the ending and it popped into my head. So I just wrote it down. Now, I will say this, I may end up not ending the book that way. I never really know, but it popped into my head and it seemed like good a good ending. But we'll see where it goes. I never know.
And yeah, and when the final product comes out, people won't know that there was a different ending, right? There's no,
Exactly.
like on the DVD movie where you get the
Exactly.
cuts, the extra scenes that are cut out and you have that different ending that shows up. There's no
Exactly.
such thing in a book,
Exactly.
I think.
Exactly.
Maybe there is.
Well, and I kind of when ideas pop into my head, I've got several short stories. They wouldn't qualify even as a novella because they're only about 2,000 words or less. But those kind of spark ideas for me too. And one of these days, I may decide to put them all in a collection in case people are interested in backstory, basically.
Sure. So you have 4 standalones you've done, I
I do.
believe, right?
Yeah.
So any of those you want to particularly talk about?
My latest one was kind of fun. It's The Killer Without a Face. And all my books are set in some place in Colorado, mostly Denver with the Annie series. But I have one on the eastern plains of Colorado, and then The Killer Without a Face is set in the high country in Colorado. And that was a lot of fun, writing about someone who has the misfortune of being hidden at a crime scene when a couple murders take place, and she can't definitively ID the killer. She's just caught a glimpse of him walking past, and she's heard his voice. But she knows that it's only a matter of time before the police figure out she was there, and by association, the killer too. So she doesn't really know what to do because she can't identify the guy. And so she takes off and she heads into the mountains, and then ends up stranded in this tiny little town in the high country. And again, my beta readers, I have two of them that really helped on this. One actually lived in the Glenwood area, and the other one lives, I believe, in Georgetown. So they're both familiar with mountain living. And the one who lived in Glenwood, I had situated this town close to Glenwood, and she said, I can't picture an area that isolated near that close to Glenwood. But she said, I have some friends who used to live about an hour outside of Grand Junction, and they were in a very isolated area. And she said, so I would suggest that. And it was like, okay, that's fair enough. You've lived up there. And then my beta reader who lives in Georgetown, she was great. She had all these comments about a town this small, the bar wouldn't stay open much past 9 o'clock. And, this is what he would need, the main male character, to go traipsing through the back country trying to find this woman. And she's great because she comes up with all these practical things. And so they both really helped. But the characters were a lot of fun. The male main character, Jess Walker, is a veteran and had a serious injury to his leg. And so he's got a limp that becomes more prominent in the cold weather and whatnot. And so that's the first main character that I've had that actually has an injury, a disability, if you will. Mm-hmm. And that was fun. And the female main character I really enjoyed because her upbringing with an alcoholic mother and an absent father and a sister who is seriously addicted to drugs and whatnot have just destroyed her sense of trust. So her ability to trust the people that are trying to help her gets really tested. And I guess that's her character arc, is getting to a point where she realizes that there are people she can trust. And of course there's the crime and the bad guy and how that goes.
Yeah, so Aileen was saying goodbye, but yep, thanks for tuning in today. Yep. Appreciate it. And then what you've got, I'll throw up your other. So you gave me some ones like you had Legacy of Secrets.
Yeah, that was the first standalone that I wrote when Annie and Angel quit talking to me after book 3. And it's set on the Eastern Plains of Colorado. The female main character, her father commits suicide, and she's having a hard time believing that that's what he's actually done. And the more she gets into settling the estate and going through his belongings, the more she realizes that she really didn't know him very well. And he has held on to the home on the Eastern Plains that he was raised in. And she knew nothing about that either. And as his only child, she's inherited this. And so the story is her journey trying to find out who her father was and why he might have committed suicide. And of course, there is a mystery and a dangerous side to the whole story. And then the second one was, let me think.
You got The Woman He Used to Know or Finding Alex?
The Finding Alex was the next
one. Yeah.
And that the idea for the story came to I drive to Boulder for my dance lessons, and I go 93, and there's these steep drop-offs on either side of Highway 93. And I was driving up there one evening, and I thought, this would be a perfect place to dump a body, because you can't see the bottom of the ravines from the highway. And then I thought, well, what if the body wasn't dead? What if the person had survived? And so that was the premise for Finding Alex. And Um, the opening is that she manages to crawl up the ravine and stumbles out into the highway in front of the main character, male main character's car, and he comes about this close to hitting her. And so he's a homicide detective, and he believes that she is probably the only surviving victim of a serial killer that he and his partner have been trying to solve a number of murders. So that's Finding Alex. And then the next one is The Woman He Used to Know. And the short the short summary is an old flame, a dead husband, and a compromised cop. So the woman who is the only suspect in the death of her husband is a woman that the cop has known. Well, he's known both of them since he was in high school, and has always had a soft spot for her. And so the question is, can he remain detached enough to handle the case without, even if it means that she's guilty? So that's the compromise, is him sorting through whether what he finds out is going to save her or send her to prison. And then we talked about the new one, The Killer Without a Face. So,
And all your books have an element of romance, you said, in them as well.
yeah,
There's usually at least
usually the two main characters, the man and the woman, eventually connect. And yeah, so the romance isn't a main theme, but it's definitely a subplot, and it usually helps to resolve the mystery, you know, them working together to sort of sort through things. I always throw romance in because I like it. I'm not a hardcore romance reader, but I do like books where characters are involved and there's some sort of relationship going on.
And you have a lot of diversity in your books too, don't you? I mean, you have a lot of different
I do.
characters, which is great. I have a lot of that in my books as well.
Yeah. I like varied characters, like Angel Cisneros, of course, is Hispanic, and in those books, Annie has a friend who was raised by a gay couple. And Legacy of Secrets, there's a biracial couple that helps with the main male characters. He's an artist, and they run a gallery in Los Angeles that he works with. And so, you know, I like to, and in the various, like The Woman He Used to Know, there are different characters that are not Caucasian. And I think that's good. You know, I think it reflects the world around us. And I always find characters like that interesting.
Yeah, I agree. It's great. And yeah, it's the way the world is, you know.
Yep.
And so is there any book you want to write you haven't written yet? It's kind of burning a hole in the back of your head, and or even maybe a different genre than you've written. I know you thought you were writing romance, and it was really more mystery, suspense romance. And
I actually have a book that I wrote that's more late in life romance. I'm not a spring chicken any longer, and so the idea that the one thing with romance novels that has always kind of annoyed me is that they always consider 40-year-olds to be old. And it's like,
well,
no.
and like on TV, you know, it's the old guy and it's the young woman, right? I mean,
Exactly.
they never seem to be the same age or close. There's always like 15, 20 years difference.
So I wanted to write a story where the main characters are late 50s, early 60s, actually. And it's written, and I really enjoy it, and I have no idea what to do with it because it's so out of the genre that I'm known to my readers for. And in talking to a number of other authors who have done that, they're all of the opinion that you would have to have a separate website and a separate Facebook page and a separate Amazon page. And I get to that point and I just think, that's too much work.
Different author name too. A lot of times they say don't publish it under a different
Well,
name.
exactly. So I don't know. Maybe one of these years I'll get it printed up as a holiday gift, and people who want it can contact me, and I'll sell it to them. But whether it'll ever be up on Amazon, probably not.
Well, maybe your fans, you put a chapter at a time on your website or something for them.
Well, that's a thought too. That's a thought too.
So I've one thing I forgot to ask you about your Annie Collins series. It's a 4-book, 5, and now soon to be 5-book series. Do they need to be read in order, or are they written to be read out of order? And what is obviously you want them to buy all the books, which I always tell people. But
they can be read separately. Yeah. There's enough backstory that you understand where the characters come from and what they've been through. However, you'll get more information, more detail if you read them in order, but you don't have to. And so it just depends. I had somebody recently go, "Oh my God, I got your book, and then I realized that it was the second one in the series." And it's like, well, so go read number 1.
That's right. Yes, and people ask me that all the time about my Jarvis series, and I say, well, I've had plenty of people read out of order. There might be spoilers if you read in middle, and you might learn things that are going to happen in previous books. But yeah, they're written to be read as standalone. At least that series was. So other ones. So, and so awards you've won. I saw a couple things on your website, I thought.
Yeah, I've been very blessed. Actually, my first book won the mystery category for the National Indie Excellence Awards, and then I entered it in the Book Life Prize, and it got a 10 out of 10 review, which put it into the quarterfinalists, up against all the other books that had gotten a 10 out of 10 review. And it didn't go any further, but I still was like, oh my gosh, this is so cool. It got a good Kirkus review. And I just was really, I don't know why I was surprised, but it, everybody seems to really like that one. The third book, The Burden of Hate, was a finalist for the National Indie Excellence Award mystery category, and it was the one that got the Kirkus starred review. I was trying to think. My book Finding Alex got me a finalist in the Rocky Mountain Fiction Writers Independent Author of the Year Award. So that was really nice. And then the new book, The Killer Without a Face, was a finalist in the mystery category for the Colorado Authors League contest. So I've been really fortunate. Readers seem to like the books, and the awards that I've entered, they seem to like them too. So yay. Yeah.
No, it's always nice to be recognized. So I always ask this question of everyone. My show is entitled Bringing Life to Characters. So what do you look for when you're bringing those characters to life in your stories that hopefully get them to jump off the page, whether you're writing them or even when you're reading other people's books? What are those things that you look for?
I think all of us have wounds, I guess, for lack of a better term. Something that stands in the way of getting what you want, or makes relationships difficult, or whatever. And And so I like to see characters that are three-dimensional. They like a policeman, for example, a homicide detective, functions well in his job, but maybe his relationships are a mess because of the job. Or, what's the reason behind him wanting to be a homicide cop? You know, what is there about Annie, for example, that drives her to keep getting involved in this stuff? And so I like to see characters that aren't perfect. Um, I I've enjoyed the stories, but I don't know if you're familiar with J.D. Robb's In Death series.
My wife has read her books.
If I have any complaint about it, it's that the main male character Rourke is just too perfect. He can do everything. He can do everything and anything perfect. He's wealthy. He's intelligent. There's nothing wrong with this guy. And after a while, it's kind of like, oh, come on, show me something about him that I can relate to as a human being, The rest of her characters, well, and he's a great character. I enjoy him as a character, but I just get a little frustrated with the perfection. The rest of her characters in that series are good. I like the ones that the humor is attached to. And, it's like the series by Tammy Hogue that I like. Both of the cops are excellent at what they do, and their private lives are a mess. And in some respects, like with Sam Kovac, it's kind of heartbreaking because he's a really good guy and he just can't catch a break with women, So I guess that's what I look for in characters. I want them to be human. I want them to have flaws, and I want to see them overcome those flaws or learn to live with those flaws as best they can. I don't like perfect characters.
Yeah, that rich guy in the J.D. Robb series, I guess he's so wealthy he just bought perfection, right? Maybe that's what it is.
I guess I don't know. They're fun books. I enjoy reading them, but like I said, after a while, I was kind of like, all right, I want to see something that really hits him and knocks him down, and let's see what he does with it.
So, do you write every day? Are you a pretty consistent writer, or are you kind of a streaky writer? Where
I'm kind of a streaky writer in the sense that I write in bursts, and then I may take a week or so off, or something will come up and I'll be busy with something else, and then something pops in my head and I come back and write. So I might get my books out faster if I would just make myself sit down every day and write, but I want the writing to be a good place. I don't want it to feel like it's something I have to do. I want it to be something that I just can't wait to do, that I enjoy doing. And so far it has been. So, if I get frustrated, I just put it away and either work on something else or just take a break for a while. So
you and me both. That's exactly the way I am too. I don't like to waste time writing if it isn't there. For me, it's got to be there, and it usually just flows out of me like that. I mean, I can write 20,000 words, just bang, 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 and then I'm drained, and then I
yeah.
So yeah.
Well, yeah. I mean, I guess that's one reason why I never did the NaNoWriMo. I never understood the point of just getting a certain number of words down. It's like that felt like wasted energy because I didn't see. It just felt like an exercise in numbers. And so for me, that never, I know a lot of people enjoy it and it works well for them, and that's great. For me, it just never appealed.
Yeah. So what advice do you give aspiring authors? who are crazy enough to want to get into the world of writing books.
I wholeheartedly agree with Stephen King when he says to be a good writer, you have to be a good reader. And so I would say read all the genres that you enjoy, and especially read the ones if there's a particular genre that you would like to write in. And then, it's a learning process like anything. Take classes, go to conferences, go to retreats, just join. I think there's a huge value in joining professional organizations, especially the local ones, because you meet fellow authors and it can be an incredibly supportive environment, especially for new authors. And so I would just say, write what you love, just keep writing, and don't ever think that your first draft is going to be as good as something that's sitting on the shelf in a bookstore, because it's not going to be ever. And don't be too hard on yourself. Just write what you enjoy. Do it for fun until you feel like you have really found a story that speaks to you, and then put all that reading, all that knowledge, and all that practice into that book and see where it goes.
Well, and I will say, going to any of the author events, BoucherCon's a good one. Killer Nashville.
Yeah.
They're going to have Left Coast Crimes going to be here next year. I don't know if you're planning on going, but
I am planning on going to that.
I'm going to try to go to it. It'll be downtown. I don't like really going downtown that much, but I think it's be a good experience. But I found that authors are, even the well-known ones, you can walk up to them and talk to them. They have no problem talking. I mean, I talked to Andrew Child, who's Lee Child's brother, who's taken over the research series at BoucherCon. Great guy to talk with. That's how I met Reed Farrell Coleman as well. And, they all, they agreed to be on my show. I didn't ask Andrew, though. I should have asked him, but I forgot to. And, but yeah, they're always very welcoming to talk to. And I know BoucherCon next year is going to be in New Orleans, and Michael Conley is going to be there. And I really want to go and talk to him, because I've got a lot of Bosch books back here.
I do too. I love his series. It's so good. And they did a beautiful job of bringing it to the screen. Whereas a lot of times it's just the
Titus Wellever really does a great job.
He is the epitome of Bosch. I couldn't have picked anybody better. Yeah. I just love that. So they did a great job. But yeah, I saw that and I thought, oh, I got to go to this.
Yeah, I think he was supposed to go a few years ago, but I think that was the one that got canceled for COVID, which I don't remember what it was supposed to be. But
and another thing for new authors, the Rocky Mountain Fiction Writers Rocky Mountain Gold Conference that they have yearly here in Denver. That's really nice because they offer all sorts of workshops, and they categorize them as beginner, intermediate, and advanced. So you can go and take a session and not feel like you're in with a bunch of big time authors and feel intimidated. You can go to those, and that's great. But it's nice because there are speakers on all sorts of topics, and that was kind of how I found BoucherCon as well. That's one of the things I really liked about it, was how many varied sessions there were and how many people you could connect with. It was a lot of fun.
Well, there's a lot of fans at BoucherCon too. I mean, it's a huge event. This last year in Nashville, it was Killer Nashville was the week before, and then BoucherCon was the week after in Nashville. So we went in and we stayed for both 2 weeks for that. And Killer Nashville is more of a learning conference, and BoucherCon, there is some learning involved in panels and stuff, but there's a lot more fans there. But the worst thing about it last year, at least for BoucherCon in Nashville, was out there at the Gaylord out there, and oh my gosh, it was such a huge place, and there was so much walking. Oh, it was exhausting, and it was like 100. It was cool inside, but it was like 100 degrees outside, and then the parking was insane. It was $35 to park.
Oh my goodness.
Unless you want to park in the mall out there and walk about a half mile, which is what we ended up doing because
Yeah.
it's way too expensive.
Most,
And then if you leave with your car the same day and come back, you
It's
got to
a-
pay again. It's not even good for a whole day.
oh my goodness.
Yeah.
That doesn't seem right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would not be a happy thing if I came across that. It's that would be
Well, there were so many other things going on there. That place is just, it's like a small city, but it's so large.
yeah.
There were so many other conferences going on, people walking around with their lanyards on, and there was just everywhere. And it was on 2 floors for the panels were upstairs, and there was one little elevator for everyone to ride up there, or you got to take all the stairs up. I enjoyed it. It was a really good time. I got to meet a lot of great people. But I was exhausted by the time we were done.
I can imagine. You know, back when I worked at the Journal, they had a conference every year, and all the staff was required to go, and it was at these convention centers, and it's the same thing. You walked a gazillion miles, and so the first thing they told everybody that was new: wear comfortable shoes. Don't wear heels.
Yeah.
Don't wear a new pair of shoes that you're going to have to break in. Just comfy shoes, because oh my goodness, and they're convention centers, so it's cement with industrial carpet over it, so there's no padding, and oh goodness, that's a lot of work.
Yeah. All right. Well, we're getting up here on time. So, do you have any events that you're doing here in the future? You said you may be going to Left Coast Crime, which is, I think, in April.
Yeah. And for local things, I'm going to do that Bighorn Book Nook in Georgetown the first 2 Saturdays in December. And then I'm waiting to hear from the organizers. There's going to be a book reading evening coming up, I think in December too. I want to say maybe the middle to the end of December. I can't remember now. Where you can go as an author and read from your books. The Mercury Cafe, if anyone is listening to this that likes to do these kind of things, they have similar evenings. You kind of have to go on their website and find out when, where you can come and you've got like 10 minutes and you can read from whatever, a book, an essay, whatever you want. And I've done that once. That was fun. And then, of course, VoucherCon, I'm going to do that in New Orleans. So that'll be fun.
That's in September next year, if I remember.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hopefully, no hurricanes.
Yeah.
There were a lot this year, it seemed like. At least Florida was getting hit with it.
Oh, yeah. It was crazy. It's crazy.
So you've got your website, social media. What's the best place to for people to get a hold of you?
I'm on Facebook, Helen Starbuck _author. If I have that right, hang on a second. I did write them down because I can never remember them. Yeah. So I'm on Instagram, and again, Helen Starbuck, one word, _author. Facebook is Helen Starbuck -author. And I've been on Threads recently, and again, it's like Instagram, Helen Starbuck _author. So, I am on TikTok, although I haven't posted anything in quite a while. Got kind of distracted, and that's just at Helen Starbuck. So you can find me pretty much anywhere.
And your books, they can get them through Amazon and anywhere else?
Well, I'm pretty much on Amazon. My books all have audiobooks, and you can get those on Amazon or through Audible. Mm-hmm. My books are in Kindle Unlimited, so if you're a member of KU, you can read them. I guess they check them out kind of like a library, I guess. I don't know if that's the right term that they use, but that's one way to read them. The first book in my series is 99 cents all the time. So that's a little encouragement. If you want to get a taste for the series, you don't have to spend a fortune to do so. And most of my ebooks are pretty reasonably priced, and they're paperbacks and audiobooks. So
Well, and I tell everyone on Kindle Unlimited, if you don't like the book, flip through the pages, please, because
Yes. Well,
we get what 0.001 cent or whatever per page or whatever.
I know, it's crazy, isn't it? And I read somewhere that somehow they know whether you're just whipping through the pages to
So you
and
got to
not
do it slowly.
and not reading them. So you kind of have to
Oh, God.
not do it too fast. And I had somebody say, well, how do they track what you read? And I said, I have no idea, but they do.
They
So,
they track everything these days. It
oh, they
seems like.
do. It's crazy.
Or okay. Was there anything else you wanted to talk about that we forgot?
No, this has been a lot of fun.
No. Yeah. Thank you. I enjoy talking with you. It's great to finally meet you sort of in person, and we may have met in the past. We're not positive,
We
but
probably did. I always tell people, like, before I go to Georgetown, for example, I always say on when I announce it, I just say, if I know you on social media, please introduce yourself and remind me, because I said, you don't necessarily look the same.
right.
And so I said, I always say, I don't want to offend anybody. So just remind me.
Well, and I could have met you at the Bighorn too, because
Yeah.
I wasn't ever selling books there, but I did walk in because I knew a few authors who Lisa Reinecke
Yeah.
and was there, and it was an author who just passed away from cancer. I'm blanking on her name.
Oh,
Todd, I know,
yeah. Todd's great.
and Becky, I think it
Yeah.
was, who just
Becky passed away too.
yeah.
Um,
Yeah, so yeah, I saw Todd who wrote a nice letter about her on there, and I had met her before too, but it had been quite a few years ago and stuff. So we don't. Is it only on Saturday then? It's not Saturday,
this,
Sunday. Huh?
this year, Jerry's only doing it on the 2 Saturdays.
Okay.
Part of the reason was we're in the community center, and right next door there used to be a food vendor. And now the food vendor has moved elsewhere. And so
Right.
the community center is kind of down at
Isolated.
the end. And so he decided to just do it on Saturday, the 2 Saturdays, and see how it goes.
Right.
He thinks the fact that the food vendor moved might have an impact on how many people we see. And so we'll just find out. We'll see.
Yeah, because our family goes up to Georgetown every year, but it's usually got to be Sunday because I'm always doing an event usually that Saturday.
Yeah.
One of those 2 Saturdays. So
Yeah.
and I will be this year so as well. So depending on how the weather is, but we'll see. We had one event canceled. Well, thank you. I appreciate you being on the show. It was great talking with you, learning more about you.
I appreciate the invitation. It's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, that's great. And hopefully we'll run into each other if Left Coast Crime, if we happen to make it.
Or maybe BoucherCon. Maybe
BoucherCon. I'm hoping to go. We got to see how much it's going to cost me.
Yeah.
Flying and the hotel and of course the ticket to get there and stuff. But it'll be worthwhile. Michael Conley being there is going to be definitely a deciding factor for me. If there's any way in the way I can go. I mean, going to New Orleans will be fun too. I mean, I've never been to New Orleans, so we'll see how it goes. And then the year after that, it's going to be in Calgary. And my wife is like, "Oh, we got to go to that one. We want to go up to Canada." So,
all right.
So we'll see how that is. So, but thank you again so much for being on. Appreciate talking with you about all your books. And anyone out there, be sure to check out Helen's books. 99 cents for that first book. That's a bargain these days.
That's a deal.
Yeah. So, all right. Thanks, Helen. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Okay. Thanks, everyone. We went a little bit long tonight, but it was great talking with Helen. I've got 2 events coming up the next couple of weeks. I won't be doing another one until December 2nd. I'll be talking to T.O. Payne, another local author, and he'll be on December 2nd at 6. But then I've got 2 events coming up. I'll be at next weekend. I'll be at Rangeview High School in Aurora. which would be great. And then actually I have 3 events, because then on Black Friday weekend, I'll be at Brighton High School on Saturday and then Broomfield High School on Sunday. Going. So I'll be busy, but I hope everyone has a wonderful Thanksgiving, and don't eat too much turkey, but we will be back in December with new episodes. And I have a lot of guests lined up for the next month or so, which will be a whole lot of fun. Take care, everyone.